Hi, everyone. I'm Joe Pritchett, career counselor at your Salem Community College, back after a brief hiatus with our next installment of Career Conversations, thinking about your future. Today, we're reaching out to the artists among us. We often think of starving artists, and there are probably more than a few of those out there. But what does it take to follow your artistic passions and carve out a career pursuing what you love? I'm grateful to welcome my guests from Idea Lab Digital and want to invite each of you to introduce yourself, including your job title and a brief description of your work. So we'll start with you, Jay, and go around from there.
Hello, my name is Jay Winkler. I'm the owner of Idea Lab Digital, where I serve as Chief Creative Officer. We are a full-service ad agency specializing in branding, digital advertising, and web design services. I'm responsible for the overall management of the firm, including operations, account and client management, project management. And then the fun part, which pertains more to the arts, I'm the creative director, which really means I tell these ladies kind of overall vision for what we're looking to do for the client, and then they really tear into the artistic creative side of things. So with that, I will let Jess introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Jessica Baskin. I'm an art director at Idea Lab, and I guess my main duties are, as Jay just said, to do the artistic design behind whatever project we're working on for a client. Typically, I'll work with Annie, who you're about to meet, and help review some of the stuff she's worked on, or we will collaborate on ideas. Sometimes my job involves helping come up with content creation, or more mundane tasks like putting a like a revision from a client, a job order together, and emailing the client, typically a part of client meetings and going over the new design work or any work that we've done for them. So communicating with the client also, but the bulk of my work is the actual design.
Hi, my name is Annie, and I'm the graphic designer and content producer at Idea Lab Digital. So I work with Jess and support her on things, doing anything from logo designs to website user interface designs, a lot of email campaigns, print work, corporate identity, kind of anything branding and digital, you name it, as well as content production. Which usually entails when a client comes to us with a website that they need created, I'll work hand in hand with the client to make sure that that content is as best it can be, as efficiently set as it can be, and fits nicely within a website.
Very nice. So I spent a bit of time on your website over the last week or so. And one of the things that stood out to me was that Annie was the intern who never left, as I recall. And so when we get to talking about your journeys to your current roles, that just intrigues me. So I think I'm going to throw it first to Annie to talk about how she got to this place where she is now.
Yeah, so I was in school online at Full Sail University and working at a bakery, and was kind of had my eyes open for an internship, but was still I was about halfway done my schooling. And Jay, who was a regular at the bakery, we ended up talking about it. And he offered if I wanted to come check out the business and see what it's about, and maybe explore like an internship opportunity, I could do that. So I ended up doing that. And so I interned, I think it started just once a week at Idea Lab. And then when I was getting closer to graduating, I ended up leaving my job at the bakery and starting full-time with Idea Lab Digital. And so then I graduated and I never left, so.
How about you, Jay?
Where do you want me to begin? Like kind of my career journey?
Yeah,
or?
how did you, I mean, what I would really like to know, and especially because we're primarily talking to younger students, you know, high school and college students. Um, when did you know that this was kind of the path you wanted to follow? Maybe not this exact business or whatever, but this field. And how did you get where you are today?
So I would go pretty far back to like when I was a young kid. You know, I always loved to draw, uh, and really drawing more so than painting. And it was really a passion. I always had a sketchbook. I always, and it was something my parents supported. And I went to art classes after school every day. And then I got to high school. I got more interested in sports and girls and other things. And I had, you know, art classes as part of the high school curriculum, but I don't know that I took it seriously. I just kind of walked into those classes and I already had this foundation. Well, it turns out my art teacher in high school was an alum of Kutztown University and their fine arts program. And he said, hey, you know, I think you really should check it out. You know, it's a nice small to medium sized school. They have this great fine arts program. And I wasn't so sure that I wanted to be an artist. And then I discovered that they had a program called communication design. That's really what I do now as my career. So I actually kind of found what I wanted to do like immediately upon being accepted into that program. You know, I knew I had some talent, but I was interested in more the technical side of things. And that allowed me to kind of bridge both worlds, you know, like the fine art side with graphic design and computer design. And now, of course, that's evolved into website design and it's gotten more complicated with coding. So I guess to answer your question, like I kind of always knew, well, didn't always knew, but I knew once I got to college that that's what I wanted to do. And then ultimately, you know, there was this sexy thing dangled like, well, you could be an art director or a creative director one day. And I don't know that I understood it back then. I was like, wow, that's it. That's what I want to do. I did, this is probably the most interesting twist. I never wanted to own my own business though. I did not set down that path. In fact, I was adamantly against it because, you know, in high school, I watched my father, who was a small business owner, go through a really tough time with an economic recession, and it was really hard on our family. And that was, you know, somewhat consistent with what we're going through now, you know, and so being a business owner scared me. But, you know, after about 10 years in the business, I kind of realized there was a bit of a ceiling with what I could do financially and then, or where I could get to financially, but also where I could get to from like just having some independence to live my life. I was kind of a slave to deadlines and such. So I moved out of New York City and started my own business. And that was like 21 years ago. So yeah, that's the long answer to that question.
That's a great story. And how about you, Jessica?
So actually kind of similar to Jay, I always loved drawing also. And, but for some reason I was kind of reflecting on this the other day. I don't know if you guys had this like in elementary school, you either got chosen or you didn't for these like challenge classes, right? So I always thought I was a good artist as a little kid. And then I don't think I got into challenge art. So I sort of like discarded that for a while, but I always liked to draw at home. But I ended up pursuing things like dance and theater and singing, and I'm really not a great singer, but for some reason until like junior year of high school, I wasn't taking art class. And then I kind of realized that I did still like that, and I just kind of took it on a whim. So ends up my senior year of high school, my teacher at the time, I was able to take a graphic design class, and we had like 3 computers that 20 some kids were sharing, like super basic Photoshop. Most of what we did was by hand, but I loved it. It was really fun. And I just remember thinking that I wasn't sure. I definitely wanted to do art, so I didn't want to go to an art school. And I ended up landing on Moravian College. It's a small liberal art school. It's one of the only ones with a graphic design program. And my teacher, Mr. Heiser, his daughter had been going there, so he had recommended it to me. So actually pretty similar to Jay's story. And once I got there, I was still sort of in between art and teaching was in the back of my mind, but art just sort of became the stronger of the two. And then from there, you want me to talk about my career, like how I ended up at Idea Lab also?
Sure.
So when I graduated from Moravian, it was 2008 and we were in a bit of a recession, so there weren't exactly a ton of jobs. So I ended up over the summer taking on 2 internships and then eventually landing a entry design level job with a large agency. And I was there for, I think, almost 3 years. So in 2011, I sort of had enough of the, as Jay was saying, like the crazy deadlines and the super long hours that sometimes come with bigger agencies. And I just happened to notice Idea Lab, and I think I emailed Jay and ended up, he called me in for an interview, and I've been there ever since.
So when we look into the world that you all work in, and knowing that there's obviously a heavy duty computer component to it, things like that, I do want to ask my 2 female guests if you see in your field any sort of a glass ceiling, a bias toward men, a bias against women, anything like that. Is it harder to climb in your field as a woman than it would be as a man? And if so, or if not, what advice would you give to a young woman who was looking at a career like you have?
Do you want me to go, Annie?
Yeah.
So I personally don't think I have ever felt that way. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. The one thing I do notice is more in like the web side of things, there definitely seems to be more males in like the coding end of things. But that is growing so much right now. I feel like if you just pay attention on like Twitter and other social media feeds, I feel like you just see more and more women adapting those roles and taking them on. I don't know if it's just being in the arts in general and that sort of a field just being more open. I have never felt that I was thought of as less in any sort of way or not able to reach a certain place in any of the places that I've worked or by the people who have worked alongside me or above me. And in college too. And also my parents always sort of instilled in me that I could do whatever I wanted. So I never really gave a second thought to that. Maybe I'm lucky in that regard, but I haven't personally had that experience.
Okay, how about you, Annie?
I kind of agree with Jess, and I don't know if that's because I'm on the younger side of my career or and that I just haven't hit a glass ceiling yet, but in school I had it was very equal of men and women teaching me. Like my professors, it wasn't like it was male dominated at all. So I think that was like the first thing to set the stage. And then as far as work goes, within the arts field, I've really only ever worked at Idea Lab Digital, and I do not feel a glass ceiling there. I think I would be less prone to see a glass ceiling though, just because I am not as concerned about climbing the corporate ladder as much as really honing my skills and like supporting a team. But yeah, I don't know, maybe there isn't as much of a glass ceiling in the arts department, but I've never experienced it.
Well, that's refreshing. It's good to know that there may be a field where um, openness, equality, equity is at play, and that's refreshing. So I
Joe,
want to
if
turn
it's,
to
Joe, if it's
go ahead.
okay, I'd love to like comment on that because
Yeah.
you know, I've been working in an agency probably for 25 years. And one thing I'm happy to report that is definitely in the art director role, which is probably one of the, I would say it has the most stature in the agency. Certainly account um, directors and managers probably have more to deal with maybe from a client level. I don't know. Um, but there's always been a female art director everywhere I've worked, which is kind of interesting observation. As the ladies were answering the questions about it, that's always been the case. Like before Jess kind of worked her way up to that position, uh, we had a young lady named Kristen who since went on to work for a big digital agency out in Texas, and she had worked up to associate art director. Before her, there was another woman named Krista, and she went on to become an art director for a local publication. And then before her, there was an art director named Deborah. So like in our agency's history, didn't dawn on me until just now. We've always had a female art director, and I think in our business, one thing that's interesting to note from the creative side, we often need a feminine touch, but I'm always leaning on Jess and Annie and then Brian, our web developer. Sometimes we need a more masculine look. And I do feel that women sometimes are more suited to have that ability to kind of toggle back and forth versus a male designer. And I'm probably cutting some short, and they might not like me saying this, might not have the ability to deliver that feminine touch from a creative standpoint sometimes. So that's just an interesting observation or note about our field in particular. I can't speak to other industries and such, but
Yeah, that is really, I mean, that's commendable, and it's an interesting thing for us to consider especially as we talk again to our young students. So I want to go over to Jay for this question. Sounds like you hire about once every 5 years. Like the time they all stay with you.
sounds about right. which is pretty long from what I understand. So I'm proud of that.
But as you are considering hiring, and I'm sure some of it depends on the position, but as you consider hiring, what's the first thing that you'll look at when you're considering someone for a position? Is it their demonstrated skill, or is their education or their degree?
I think it's both. So at a small agency like ours, we're really looking for creatives or designers that typically I'd like them to hold a BFA degree in graphic design or similar, coupled with a few years of experience in the field before we hire them. We have that luxury as a small agency that if there is an opening, typically we need them to be able to sit down and get to work, and we don't have a ton of training and learning curve involved. Annie was unique starting as an intern and studying, taking online classes as she started her career with us. But I knew that was a great benefit to her and to us, where she was able to put things she was learning to immediate use. So with that said, we'd certainly be open to hiring someone with an associate's degree or a 2-year degree if they probably had a really strong portfolio and the experience I felt they needed to be successful. Like I would never hire someone and put them in a situation where they're going to fail. And I've worked for enough employers in the past to know that happens all the time. That they hire someone that's underqualified because they can get them for a lower salary, and then they put them into this role and they're not prepared. They either don't know the software, they don't have the design skills, they don't speak the language of design. And so that's kind of our take on that and kind of what we'd be looking for, someone that has that balance of education and then some experience. I would say typically I'd prefer a few years of experience. Again, Annie was a little bit of an exception to that, and she was kind of starting at an entry level point, but she's since like jumped quickly into a more important role. The other thing I just want to mention too, because if there's anyone out there listening or watching this that's like studying fine arts but more interested on the design and technical side of things, I do feel there's a little bit of this, what's the word? Anxiety about learning the software, becoming skilled with computers. And absolutely, you need to know the software. In our business, it's specifically the Adobe Creative Cloud suite of products like Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, XD, and now some coding. But none of that is any good. You could be the most experienced software person in the world, but if you don't have a basic understanding of composition, color theory, typography, and also maybe being able to conceptualize and copyright a little bit and copy edit and understand what we're trying to achieve for clients, then it's going to be really tough to get a job in an agency. Now, if you're like purely an illustrator or a designer and you're working for a design firm or as a freelancer, that's totally different. You don't necessarily need that full rounded skill set. You could just really perfect your craft of being an illustrator or a designer or something and not have to worry so much about the message and the conceptual side that we have to worry about. So again, a longer answer to your question, but I think it's important to know that like, I don't know that we consider ourselves fine artists. We're commercial artists, graphic artists, more specifically.
But with still the tip of the hat to fine arts, definitely.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff you said reminded me of an episode of The Office. I don't know, just
yeah, maybe I don't know which one that is, but
when Pam wanted to go to Pratt Institute.
Oh yeah, there you go. Oh yeah, you're right. I remember.
I would like to ask. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just want to add to what Jay said also that, I remember being so focused on learning the design programs in college, but they are continuously evolving and we're always continuing to learn with them. So I feel like what I learned in school was very helpful and very important, but you just continue learning as you just dive into it when you're working also. So it doesn't end.
Well, this interview is not my interview. It's yours, obviously. But one of the things I say to students, no matter what students I meet with, is if you want to succeed, be curious. Like, continue to learn new things, learn what's out there, adapt, adjust. But just real quick, back to Jay and Jessica. Obviously Annie started with you as an intern. Did either of you have internship experiences?
Jess, you want to go first?
Sure. In college, I had a pretty brief internship. I have to say, I was actually sort of disappointed with my experience there. I was sort of on my own, more or less doing freelance work for someone who had a really great cause he was working towards and is a great person, but it maybe in hindsight wasn't the best learning experience because I wasn't with other designers that I could learn from or get an idea of like what it meant to work on a project for a certain deadline and what our typical clients might look like. So that was for a semester. And then, as I mentioned before, when I graduated, we were in a bit of a recession. So I ended up getting another internship, but it was paid. And that was, I learned a bit more there because I was in Philly and I was working on a team for a healthcare company. They were actually putting books together for healthcare studies, and very different than what I ended up working in, but a little more structured. And I was able to, get feedback from the people I worked with.
I apologize for missing that. I rarely get to the grocery store
Oh.
without forgetting why I went.
I didn't really give a lot of detail, so you didn't really miss it.
How about you, Jay?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned earlier, I had so much anxiety about, I think, getting a solid job upon graduation. I over-interned, maybe. I actually had 3 internships that I did during college. I did one that was part of the curriculum in the design program I studied in, where they assigned us somewhat randomly to either a design firm or an agency or like a print house. So my first internship was with a graphic design firm, and they were very strictly a design firm, not an agency, where they were doing back then brochures and collateral for a lot of corporations. That experience was okay. Like I didn't feel like I really got my hands on the greatest projects, but that's part of being an intern. Second internship I did was with a nonprofit group, an environmental group in Washington, D.C. And I actually designed their annual report. And so that was really exciting because I was on my own. They gave me this tiny little office that looked like a broom closet. And it was one of this really old Mac computer that had a program called PageMaker, which is now the equivalent of InDesign. And I designed this entire annual report. And I had to take it all the way through, like meeting with the printer and getting printing cost and budget. And it had anything and everything to do with where I'm at right now, because that experience forced me to learn the entire process of seeing a design through from concept to copywriting, editing, file prep to the print process. And even now that we're in this world of websites and digital publication, it's still the same. Like we're still designing and creating stuff, and composition matters, copywriting and editing matters. And in the end, we got to figure out how to publish it. It's just that we're publishing it online somewhere. So in my mind, that foundation, like nothing's really changed. The technology keeps changing, as Jess mentioned. And then I did a third internship with an agency, and I worked on all kinds of different stuff. But the most exciting one was this independent thing where I was working for this nonprofit organization and they had no money really to pay me. I got a lot of great lunches and stuff like that, but the experience was incredible. So I would absolutely, anyone who's considering this field, I would absolutely like say, hey, do the internship, even if you have to do it for free and find another job on top of it. Like it's going to pay off in the end.
I just want to ask Jessica and Annie, listening to Jay talk about his internships, was it any wonder he ended up in business for himself? I mean, the ones that he raved about were the independent ones, right?
Very true.
See, we can read you, Jay.
Yeah. I don't know if I've talked to them about those particular experiences. I was fortunate to like really force myself into some, I wouldn't say difficult situations, but I don't know. I just challenged myself at that point, and when you're in your 20s, you feel like you can do anything. So, I wasn't as maybe scared as like now to go do an internship in some different field. I'd be scared to death. I think that'd be really hard. So.
Well, one last question. And I think for this one, we'll start with Jessica, move to Annie, and then we'll give Jay the last word. What is one piece of advice you would give, perhaps something you wish someone had told you early in the process of pursuing this career path that you've been on?
Well, if I can say 2 things, actually. The one I kind of already said, which was that I don't think you should view school as like, you're just checking off your list. You've accomplished that. You're done. Now you're going to get the job. We're constantly learning, and especially with the way the world of web changes, and you just have to be willing to continue to learn. I think that's actually a very exciting thing about our career, because you don't feel like it's ever stale. And secondly, this isn't very deep or anything, but I kind of wish that I have been told to take a public speaking class alongside my art classes because, especially, I'm a very like soft-spoken person. Sometimes I just want to like raise my hand in a meeting. I think about stuff a lot before I voice it. And when you're doing a design for a client, you need to present it to them and explain why you arrived at the solution that you did, and be willing to have a conversation with them also about, you know, does this work for their clients, etc. So when we presented our work in art class, we would talk in front of our peers for the most part. So that to me is more relatable to the way I work with Annie and Jay and our team. It's a little different and a little more intimidating perhaps when you're speaking to a client. And so I kind of wish I don't think I thought it was necessary, and no one ever suggested it to me to take a public speaking class. So I think that would be helpful if you can get your hands on that.
So before I jump into advice about pursuing the arts, I just thought I would give some advice for my path and how it happened. I immediately graduating high school, went to a 4-year college, not really knowing what I wanted to do. And I just definitely regretted it. I started there and I was there for 1 year. And because I didn't know what I wanted to do, I was just taking random classes and paying so much money and gaining so much debt because of that. And so I ended up putting the brakes on school, took some time to do some mission work. And then when I got back, I went to the community college in our town and took my gen eds. And that was when I was kind of in the mindset of just what Jess was saying not to do, just check the box, get done school and get out of there. And through all of my business classes, I was like on the side doodling or like making like cool posters or like writing out lyrics in a cool way using Word or something, just very amateur things. But I was finding that I was so passionate about design that I was doing it in my classes that I wasn't supposed to be doing it. So that's when I decided to pursue graphic design. And yeah, I think one piece of advice I would give was I was kind of hesitant to pursue it because of that whole starving artist stereotype, and knowing that I wanted to be financially stable. I wanted to get rid of student loans. I wanted to be professionally respected, and I was hesitant because I didn't know if like an arts field would do that. But I think nowadays it's everywhere, especially digital art, and every kind of company needs it. So it is more corporate if that's what you're looking for. So I would just say, if you're hesitating to do something in the arts because of those reasons, that's not a good reason, because you can do it now and you can really succeed in it.
All right, I think I'm up. So my advice would be, and I can't speak to the arts as a whole, but if someone's pursuing a career in the graphic arts, or an agency type career, like we have, my advice would be to, and I would echo what Annie and Jess are saying, like, I wouldn't worry so much about the learning part. You have your foundation classes that are important. You need to understand, like I said earlier, composition and color and design and those things. But you're going to constantly be learning the software and the technology. It's going to change. So I would focus more on actually the arts side of it and understanding how to properly design and be the most well-rounded designer or thinker that you can be. One of my professors said something to me in one of my advertising classes that I'll never forget. And he said that if you want to be, the best person in your field possible, the greatest gift you can give yourself is to be as well read as possible. And I think, Joe, you were saying something along these lines earlier. He said, you're not a business major, but I would encourage you to get a subscription to the Wall Street Journal and just try to read as much of it as you can, or read about, things that you're not interested in or other fields. Understand pop culture, current events, what's trending in literature and film, because that's going to arm you with not only more knowledge, but adaptability to be able to work on anything, and we have a bizarre range of clients. I mean, everything from manufacturers, to professional services like legal, law firms, and anyway, the list goes to technology. And we're in one day, I mean, even today, like Annie, for instance, I think she jumped between probably 3 different clients, 3 totally different industries, and has to put on a different mindset of like, okay, wait, what's the feel of this? What's the look of it? What's the message? What's the mission? And that all comes back to just being, well-rounded and kind of knowing the world around you. So, there's like your formal education that's important. There's this constant quest for learning that I feel is important, but then there's also just being well-rounded and well-read in general. That is something that's going to be ongoing through your entire career as an artist. So that's my advice.
I think that's a perfect jumping out spot. I couldn't have said that one better myself, Jay. Thank you. I just want to tell each of you how much I appreciate you being with me today. I know our art students at Salem Community College are going to get to see this and they'll love it. And hopefully it's good for a number of people in our community, but appreciate you spending time with me and just having this moment with you.